Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. Joan served the state of California as a member on the Arts Council and on the Film Commission. She was formerly on the Architectural Commission and fulfilled 2 terms on the Fine Arts Commission for the city of Beverly Hills. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine, Condé Nast Publications, and the Hearst Corporation, Joan covered the world of fashion, the mysteries of food, the excitement of theater, and the international art scene. She continues to find people who are on the cutting edge of their professions. Here's Joan Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're taping here at the Hollywood Museum on Highland Avenue in the historic Max Factor building, and our guests today are photographer Alexandra Hedison and actor Joe Brandi. Native Angelino, photographer Alexandra Hedison graduated from UCLA and went on to have a long career in many different things. We're going to talk about those things. I met her when she was at Marymount High School in West LA, where my daughters were going to school. And I met you a long time ago when you were going to Marymount. My girls were going to Marymount too.
That's right. And
in West LA. When you came out, where were you going? You went to SUNY, right?
I went to SUNY Purchase.
Uh-huh.
And then I went to UCLA, where I actually didn't graduate.
Ah.
But I was there for a while. In fact, the first year I was at UCLA, I wasn't enrolled.
Oh, that's great.
I just went. My sister was at UCLA, and I think I went to a play there or something, and then I heard there was this interesting class, and I went to the class. And this is in the days where you could kind of just walk into a class, and before security and all that. And I would go to classes that were interesting.
But you felt comfortable probably too, because Marymount High School was right across the street.
It was right across the street.
So you had that feeling like it was home base.
It was home base.
Why did you go to SUNY?
I went to SUNY Purchase for acting.
Ah.
Great acting program. It's also a great art school.
I see.
So
did you take those kind of classes?
Well, I took a ton. I was in the MFA program there, so I was doing a lot of acting classes and speech classes and all that stuff.
Well, we know David Hedison, who's your father. We know Bridget, who is your mother. I mean, you're old family friends. I have to divulge all of this information.
Please do.
But did you want to follow in your father's footsteps as an actor?
You know what? I have to say, I grew up in Los Angeles. My father was an actor. Their friends were actors and writers and directors. And I just thought that it just seemed like the most obvious choice. And I liked the idea of performance. I liked being in front of an audience and having that relationship, having a dialogue.
But that was theater, right?
That was theater.
Uh-huh.
And as soon as I went into film and television, I didn't really know what I was doing. I would get cast, but I didn't connect with it, and it took me a while.
Was it that different?
It was completely different. It was completely different, mainly because the theater I was doing in Los Angeles, I'd say in the early 90s, was kind of performance art. I was working at Highways. I worked with Tim Miller. I did something at Lace. I was
all arts-oriented
places. All arts-oriented,
exactly.
And I was interested in the arts.
Right.
When I made it commercial, which is what I thought I was supposed to do, I should make money. What am I going to do with my future? It became less interesting for me. And it felt like I was compromising myself.
But hadn't you been on the set with your father, on the set?
I had, but here's the difference. My father loves acting. My father loves it, whether he's doing equity waiver theater,
anything,
somewhere, whether he's doing a TV show, it doesn't matter. It's about the part, it's about the process. And I didn't have the same respect for acting as he did.
But I know your mom used to bring you to the ballet bar, because we would take our kids to Tanya Lachine class, because that's where I met Bridget many years ago. And you kids were just little kids at the time. But she had this artistic bent too.
Well, my mother was artistic. She she was interested in so many things. She was not so interested in the world of Hollywood and acting.
No, that's what was so
good.
good.
She kind of put up with it.
That was what's so good about her, because she was like totally supportive of your father. She had a totally normal. You had a
totally normal. Yeah.
Household, right?
Completely normal.
I know.
Completely normal. And they'd have parties and people would come over and, you know.
So when did photography come into this? Did you think you were going to make more money as a photographer than as an actor?
No. See, that was the key.
That's right.
Photography was a habit. Photography was this. First of all, when I was in high school, I was so artistic. Everything I did had to do with the arts. But I didn't consider it, and it sounds crazy, but I didn't think that was going to be my job. It was just something I loved. It was something I did, but I didn't validate it. And it wasn't until I was making money as an actor that I would take the money I had and I'd buy a camera, I'd buy film, I'd start experimenting. And
so you were even doing it then?
I was doing it then.
So when you got out of high school, what kind of camera did you have?
Well, the first camera I used was my father's camera from the 60s. He had a Nikon, a 35mm film camera from the 60s. It's this old heavy thing, and it was fantastic. I didn't even know how to use it. It doesn't have a light meter. It was just great. It was fantastic. That was the first camera I used. Then I got another, I think it was a...
But what were you shooting? What were you shooting?
I was shooting, the first things I was shooting were people.
Oh, they were?
Yeah, it was just, I was shooting my actor friends, and they'd say, and something turned out really well, and they said, will you do my headshots? Will you do this shot? Will you do that?
So you were doing that?
So that's what I was doing, and I loved it. It was great.
So where did things shift? Where did things shift? Because you just came back from Europe. You had a fantastic show there. You've gotten awards for your work and honors around the world, like the UK and Singapore and France. I mean, you're known as a photographer now.
Right.
Great shows. Where did this change?
Well, I think that what has happened my whole life is that the things that I haven't paid attention to, the things that are just natural to me, they've started to emerge as I've gotten older. They're the things that define me. They are who I am. Taking photographs of abstract things, thinking of things in a more poetic way, it's really maybe what I'm about.
So it's not a traditional approach.
You're
not. You're not taking a traditional approach.
Not at all. I didn't go to art school. I didn't start with galleries who were. It was completely of my own making.
Do you go into the dark room?
I did. I used to go into the dark room. I certainly did, and
so now how
do
you edit, and how do you?
Well, probably about 10 years ago now, I started working with a fine art printer. His name's Chip Levitt, and he printed my first show, which was at Rose Gallery in Los Angeles, in Santa Monica. And the way it happened for me is I started experimenting at labs. I'd walk into a photo lab. I didn't know what I was doing. I'd talk to the people behind the counter.
And there used to be a lot of labs around town.
Tons of labs.
Great
tons of labs. And you'd walk in and just the smell, you could smell the lab. It was great. And, I had friends show me around in the dark room, and I started playing around, and I was printing my own work in the beginning. But as I was shooting more, it occurred to me that it was as important to print as it was to shoot.
Well, that's what
I think. And I
think.
wasn't as good a printer as I was. I was more focused on shooting than I was printing.
But if you know how to print, then you know what a good printer is.
That's right.
Isn't that right?
That's right.
That's how
and
you
they're
found?
not. Photographers are not always good printers.
No, but a lot of them do their own printing, right?
A lot of them do, but now not so much, I don't think.
When you go in to work on a show, say this show in Portugal that you just had, is it everybody knows this is Nowhere. And this is a great catalog.
Thank you.
From the show. The approach is totally abstract, isn't it? You're shooting portions of things.
Yeah, it is. This is actually a catalog from a show that I did at Diane Rosenstein Fine Art.
Oh, that was at Diane. But
yeah,
did you use some of the same?
I did. I used some of the same work.
Can we show this?
Yeah, absolutely. This is from the series of work I did in Malibu. I shot from the same places on the beach near where I grew up in Malibu, and I shot over 4 years using different cameras, film, digital.
The same area?
Same spots over 4 years, different seasons.
That's so great, because that's what David Hockney did in the countryside. He went and photographed the same thing, winter, summer,
Right.
spring,
Right.
and that's all in the show that's going to Australia.
Yeah.
But it's the series of painting. It's like, how can a photographer or an artist wait for all those seasons?
Well, here's the thing. It wasn't my intention. My intention was to go and shoot in the winter when it was kind of stormy. It's very specific, the landscape. It's rough and dark and moody. It's beautiful. But in winter, I have to wait a year to the next winter.
I mean.
So I'd go back and I'd think, oh, well, this is interesting. What's happening now is interesting. And I was collecting these images, trying to tell a story, figuring out what is the lens. What is the actual lens? Is it a 35 millimeter camera? Is it medium format? Is it digital? Is it,
And
what
you
is it?
kept changing.
I kept changing, and then I realized that the way to tell this story was using all of it.
So that's what you did. Then what did you do? We talked about this catalog, which is from Diane Rosenstein, but a lot of it overlapped.
Yes, a lot of the work.
Is this part of it?
Yeah, this is part of the series. And again, when you see the image close up, it kind of has a movement to it, because the images that I took over time, I ended up using many of them and creating composites.
Oh, so it's like layer on layer?
It's layer and layer and layer.
And is that what this one is?
And that's what this is.
And
as
what
well.
is this image?
This is an image of, it's actually the room that I used when I was shooting. So I would go back to the same spot after I'd shoot, and that was out of the curtains, out the window.
So
Yeah.
it would be a different color as it went out.
It, well,
time you looked out.
It was always different. Sometimes I'd finish at 3, sometimes I'd finish at 7, sometimes I'd get there. Some of those were taken in the morning and in the evening, different times. It was sort of. It was like I was recording myself as I was shooting.
Do you like to shoot in black and white or in color?
I like to shoot in color. Yeah,
Which is interesting too.
Although this is black and white, so I guess both.
And then when you got these honors for your work in the UK and Singapore and France, I mean, this is like a big, wide difference. Yeah. What were prominent in those places?
Well,
did they look for the same kind of thing in you?
I don't, you know what, I don't know. I feel like I've been really lucky as an artist. I've met so many people and had these incredible opportunities, been invited to show my work in different places. Sometimes it's the color work. In this show, everybody knows This Is Nowhere. There was a whole series of black and white work that's very graphic.
And what size are they?
Well, they range from the black and white work. It's a series of black and white photographs that I've put together. So sometimes they're medium format film strips, basically, and I've put them together. So the size of a medium format photograph next to each other. Sometimes I have a grid of 6. Sometimes it's 3. So it depends.
They could be 8 by 10, but they're in a huge.
They're huge. So I think the largest one is about 60 by 90 inches.
So do those all tell a story? Do they tell a different story? It's about the way of telling stories. So these film strips, and I'll show you some. They're placed together in a way, and they create a kind of grid pattern. And what they look completely abstract. And is that why we get this cover?
Yeah, so that's what this is. But what it is really
let me see the back.
Yeah, there's the back.
The back like really does it right.
Yeah, so and when they're next to each other, they create these kind of.
So they're like that.
They're like these abstractions. So it's one frame, another frame. They're frame upon frame, and it's like I see them as like chapters in a story.
Talking about telling the story. You're directing. Is that the next step, do you think, directing?
It could be. It could be, but I can't really think of it in terms of like I'm going to do this thing. I'm just following the thread, not really knowing.
But you're telling a story, which is the beginning, right?
It is.
Of this directing and being a filmmaker.
It is. I mean.
Do you like that medium?
I do like it. I don't know where I fit in with it, but I like it. There are many possibilities, especially now.
I think the title of this, everybody knows This Is Nowhere. What is that?
It's a Neil Young. It's from a Neil Young song.
And it
Yeah,
is. So
everybody
where are
knows
you?
This Is Nowhere. Well, the whole idea with shooting these Malibu images is I was going back to the beginning of my memory. I was trying to tell a story, like what is the story and what is memory? What are our stories? It's kind of nowhere. It's not here. It's not there. It's not. It's everywhere. It's nowhere.
Well, we're glad you were here today.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy to be here.
We've waited so long. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Joan.
Don't go away. We'll be right back with actor Joe Brandi. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're taping here at the Hollywood Museum in the historic Max Factor building, and we're with actor, voiceover artist Joe Brandi, who was born and raised in the suburbs of Boston, attended Bridgewater State College, Art Institute of Boston, and University of Massachusetts in Lowell. So you studied music, computer science, music recording. What were you looking to do with all these places?
Very, very interesting question. I had kind of bounced around a lot because I didn't really, I love the arts, but I didn't really have like a specific skill set that I could have entered the workforce with. So I always wanted something that could actually fuel my creative endeavors. So I decided to end with computer science, even though I did have some experience with art.
And then you went into the corporate world.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what did you do? I mean, did the art part help you there?
Yeah, it helped me with being creative and trying to come up with different solutions on how to solve, business problems, or even to get creative. I did software testing for a while, which is
what is that?
It's basically I try to break things, which is what it comes down to, and I just try to find more and more creative ways to break stuff. So this was like software, like websites and things like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you actually made your living doing that kind of stuff that we don't understand.
Right. Well, it's fun, right? Trying to break stuff is fun.
I think then the other thing that was like so strange is from that world you trained to be a yoga instructor.
Absolutely. So what happened was I ended up getting laid off from my job. I was working at Sun Microsystems at the time. And I ended up getting laid off. And yoga had always been something that I had done to kind of like de-stress. And I knew that after my first yoga class that I would want to teach it at some point because I just felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. So they gave me a nice severance package, and I said, all right, I know exactly what I need to do next. So I went and I trained, and I went for a month-long training at the Kripalu Center, and I had taught yoga for like full-time for 3 years after that.
Oh, you did? Where did you train?
I trained at the Kripalu Center, and that's in western Massachusetts, very close to the New York border.
Oh, I see. And then how rigid is it? That training.
By rigid, what exactly do you mean?
How hard is it to train to be a yoga teacher?
It takes some dedication. For the training itself, it was like we'd get up in the morning, we'd do a specific morning practice, and then we go into more of like the curriculum type of stuff. So let's break down anatomy, let's break down like breathing techniques. And all that type of stuff, and even some of the history of yoga too.
So
and
there
then,
were classes? You went to classes?
Yeah, essentially when I was at this Kripalu Center, it was yoga class in the morning, classes that would just kind of instruct you on the history and that type of stuff. And then another second portion where you do some more instructional stuff, and then another yoga class.
So it was like away at school. You were away at school, right?
Absolutely, and it was one of the best experiences of my life, besides marrying my wife. It was just a time for me to just really reflect and kind of see where I came from and where I wanted to go next.
Were they big classes? Were there a lot of people gathered there?
Yeah, very good question. There were about 70 people that went through the
Wow.
teacher training together, and I actually have this great big picture, and I can send you a copy of it, of all of us, outside, and there's just a whole slew of people. You get to know different people, all different ages, all different ethnicities.
Around the country, or just from
even
the
around
East
the world.
Coast? Really?
Even around the world, yeah. People would come from other countries. I think there was someone from Australia in there as well, too. So,
And when you're taking those classes and all this different group of people are around you, are they all looking to go out and teach at different places, or do you think they're there just for this experience to learn how to do yoga better?
Yeah, it's very interesting because, everybody did have a different thing they wanted to get out of it.
Yeah.
So some were exactly what you said. Some just wanted to deepen their own practice. Other people had the intention of, yes, I do want to be a trainer. Some were a teacher, and some were actually teaching beforehand, but they were just going to get their certification.
Refresh. Did you have to be recommended to go there? Did you have to pass any kind of test to get in?
No test per se, but I did have to do some references. So some of my former instructors would kind of come forward and say, like, he's good. You should accept him into the program.
Okay, so we have our yoga teacher, but we also have an actor.
Yeah.
When did this come into your path?
When did the acting come in?
Yeah.
I would say, honestly speaking, it was probably when I was young. And my friends and I, we'd all get together. We were big wrestling fans, too. And we built a ring in our backyard, and we did backyard wrestling. We have a camcorder that my friend would sneak out. So his mother didn't know we took the camcorder out because he'd get in big trouble because that thing was a lot of money. So we'd create these stories too, and not only that, but just getting together with friends and doing something that we called dubs, where we'd record like a sitcom show, and we'd put our own voices over it, and we'd actually start to create our own stories out of those.
So you really started doing it with somebody else's work, but then you started making your own things?
Exactly.
So you were writing your own material?
Yeah, in some ways,
and your
Absolutely.
voices, because you ended up, I mean, the reason that we wanted you here was to talk about Echoes of Tattered Tongues, which you've done the audio book for.
Absolutely.
So from acting in the backyard and doing your dubs, you've gone into news and DJ and recordings.
Yep. So some of the things that I would do with my friends would be like we'd have our own fake news program, or we'd do some DJing, just for the audio aspect of it. So even at that point, and we'd emulate people too. So we'd play different characters, you know what I mean? And it was just a lot of fun.
So were you teenagers then?
Yeah, I would say early teens to like my late teens. I think the dubs showed up like in our later teens because that's when my friend got the camcorder and we could do it on there.
So that was all in the background, this acting part.
Absolutely.
And you never went out and did anything? You didn't take acting lessons?
I did do a musical in high school. Other than that, I did take some training in Boston when I was there. I did some voiceover classes in Boston, also some acting in Boston, and I actually got a part as a lead in an independent film called The Rude, the Mad, and the Funny back in Massachusetts, which kind of spurred my move out to L.A.
And then did you come here to work in theater or in film?
It was more film, I would say, and then the voice thing has kind of always been something my dad had said, you really got a talent for that. You got a great voice. And it wasn't until I met my good friend Tom Bajoris, who is an audio engineer, who ended up engineering this product.
Of this book.
Of this book, exactly. And he's like, we were talking about voiceover stuff, and he's like, I think you'd be really great at audiobooks. I'm like, and he told me about this audition that he had coming up. So I went in, I auditioned, and sure enough, here I am.
Because you need a voiceover agent, right? Aren't there agents who do that?
A lot of times you do, but sometimes if you have a relationship with a producer or an engineer, sometimes you can just set the audition up through them as
So the engineer has the work already because he's going to be doing it, and then he needs a voice person to continue his job, I guess, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, so one of the things you talked about is an audio drama. Is that like the dubs?
It's similar to the dubs.
What is audio drama versus audio book?
Very good question. An audio drama is basically like, say you've got your movie. So say you watch like maybe The Avengers or something like that. And if you took all of the video out of The Avengers, you just have dialogue and a bunch of sound effects, essentially.
Yeah.
So my friend Jason Penny and I, we did this demo of a short story that he wrote himself, actually with another friend of ours, Matt Durson. And and we did like a demo, so just a short portion of it, and that was my first kind of foray into doing something that was more produced than just us goofing around. And,
like in the backyard, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we went through, we created our own sounds, we did the whole story. He played one character, I played the other character in just this short demo. It was a lot of fun to do.
So you had a script, and you just read, and then did you have sound effects too with it?
Yeah.
You did the whole thing, except there was no film.
Right,
Is
exactly.
that it?
Yeah.
So that's an audio drama?
Yeah. So it's basically like taking the film and just removing the video
see,
from it, so there's no video at all.
But isn't that how radio was early on?
Absolutely.
And when
Absolutely.
you hear click, 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 click,
Yep,
click, or
someone
the
would be-
squeaky door.
Right? Or someone would be raking like a washboard or something
Yeah,
like that just to
but
create.
Was it the same thing? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, what we did was like for footsteps,
Yeah.
we had to create all of our sounds because they didn't have, well, we were too cheap, or we didn't have enough money to make, get a sound effects library at that time, so we had to make our own sound effects.
But did they have those libraries still? Because those people, they had an actual sound effects person at the studio, right? Doing those things.
Oh, back in the day, yeah, they just did it all live, right?
Yeah.
They mic'd up like whatever they needed to, like if it's footsteps, then they somehow mic'd up someone like stepping.
But now it must be on computer. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of samples out there that you can use, that you can just plug in, and you're good to go. But for us, it was like we actually took shoes and we were like stepping it down
So you
on
made
floor
all your
and
own-
mic'd that up. Yeah.
You made your own sound effects?
Yes,
Yeah,
we did.
I see. Okay, so then that's the audio drama.
Uh-huh.
We have the story without any film. And then the audio book is, I guess, totally different because it's somebody else's work.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And to take this work, I read this book, and literally I was just like, there was such a roller coaster of emotions that I was feeling through the whole thing. It's heavy at times. There's some lightheartedness at times. I just love the journey that these characters go on.
The book that John, say his name for us?
Guzlowski.
Guzlowski.
Yep.
The journey that John Guzlowski takes is with his parents, his mother and his father. But he doesn't just write a memoir. There's poetry in it. And do you read the poetry too?
Oh, absolutely.
You read
Yeah.
the whole book?
The whole book, poetry, prose, the whole 9 yards.
And then how do you rehearse for that?
It's interesting because the process basically went a little bit like this. I read the whole book a couple times, and just to get a feel for like what the emotional tone was for each section of the book. And then what we would do is we'd have a plan of when we went into the studio, we were going to shoot to complete so many pages of the book.
Oh, I see.
And what we found out was there were 3 of us there. So the engineer, the producer who's also the publisher, Terry Tegnazian, the engineer, Tom Bajoris, and I.
So what kind of voice do you read it in?
It's mainly just, my regular speaking voice. A lot of the book is just me telling the story of these people. But for the poetry, we had to take a different approach for the poetry pieces because some of them are a little abstract at times and just kind of images or snapshots. There are some poems that are written from someone speaking in the first person.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I wondered.
yeah, so there are some where you hear about his mom will be speaking. So I took, like, we didn't want it to sound too cartoony. I'm not going to be like, oh, blah, 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 blah.
I wondered, yeah.
No, so it's just a slight shift, and maybe it's just a little bit of a higher pitch, but I was more concerned about just getting the feeling of his mom, and there's just some sarcasm with his mom, which is really quite funny, and it adds like a little bit of humor in the book, which, there's a lot of dark stories in there.
Very
but,
dark. Do you have sound effects?
No sound effects.
What
because,
about music?
No music.
So it's just reading this book. You just put the CD in your car and listen to it.
Yeah.
And you listen to your voice. Ah,
Yes.
very good.
Yeah.
John Brandi's voice, reading Echoes of Tattered Tongues by John Guzlowski.
Absolutely.
And I'm so glad you came to tell us about it today.
So glad to be here, Joan. Thank you so much.
Thank
I appreciate
you.
it.
And thanks for watching. Keep writing to JAQUINN1 at AOL.com. See you next time.